who had been untrained as nursing anyway at all, the way they could, the way they turned round and became really as good as nurses in many respects.
Now I understand that you were responsible for establishing the Cholera Hill. Could you tell me which camp it was, firstly, and secondly, is it actually that tented area that's shown in George Aspinall's photographs?
Yes, well, Cholera Hill was just a little hill adjacent to the main camp in Shimo Songkurai, and we decided it was just as well to put it into quarantine, which we did, so that I spent a good deal of time up there, and it became a spot where the Japanese wouldn't dare come near us. Every now and again some of our shrewder boys would steal a yak, which was a kind of a beast that the Japs used to pull these little carts along through the mud, and the yak would have to be brought up to Cholera Hill, and it had very, very short life once it got there. It was suddenly a meat issue around the place. There is a picture in the in George Aspinall's book of the Cholera Hill, showing a little table, which was the so-called operating table, which we did. We had little to treat them with except fluid saline, which we ran in intravenously. Fortunately, I had a officer with me in this camp who was a pathologist, and he had carried a microscope with him, and in this little camp there was a stream, and the water was the right pH that we could use for treatment of these unfortunate cases, and it proved to be remarkably satisfactory, in as much as the survival rate was 50%, which is, even in those days, considered to be quite a acceptable standard. We used to steal the salt from the Jap kitchen and make up the saline and run it straight in without any, or very few reactions. I was also very fortunate in having a pharmacist too in the camp. He could make up the solutions. He was also became quite a reasonable anaesthetist before he had finished doing the smaller surgery, which we had to do every now and again, including a few appendices, both of which managed to survive.
With your saline drips, how did you distill water, or did you use rainwater?
We just used the water from this stream, yeah, which fortunately had the right pH. Wilson, the pathologist, who subsequently became professor of tropical medicine in Liverpool University in England, had the dyes to test the pH, and so we had quite a good little unit going eventually under extremely rough conditions.
And what did you use for anaesthetic?
Oh, well, with the cholera we didn't have to use anaesthesia, but there were a few in the abdominal cases, or some of the bad ulcers. I had been on the Shell Company Island in Singapore in the early days of Changi, and there the Shell Company Island had a hospital where we found lots of drugs, and I was able to purloin quite a lot of the most unusual mixture of ether and chloroform, which was used by the Scots. It was an exciting sort of anaesthetic as far as everybody was concerned, but it was effective. So that plus a lot of other ampoules of emetine and so on I managed to get away with. It was served me with, or served us with great satisfaction. It was extraordinary that, because in actual fact back in Changi I was able to take quite a bit of this back to the main camp when we came in, which was very fortuitous.
Are there any examples of innovation, inventiveness that come readily to mind?
Well, the other one thing was we had to do, I did quite a number of blood transfusions up there. It was direct matching, and we'd go and we'd buy or steal the Japanese bike and spin the blood on that. And again, this is particularly for the cholera cases where they needed fluid of all kinds. This very rough method was very rough, but it seemed to be quite effective. We had no disasters. We did as much matching as we could, but it was always quite an exciting business.
And this
this was right up in the jungle where there was impossible to do anything. We were miles from everybody else, so you just had to take a risk.
So you would take from the dome,
take from one, spin it,
and
see if you didn't get any reactions, and there you are.
Yes.
But I guess when they're so dehydrated, but very few had no severe reactions.
Yes. Roy Mills mentions that he taught his medical orderly, a fellow named George Beecham, to do the intravenous injections by cutting down somewhere in the vicinity of the ankle and putting a bamboo.
That's right. You could. I fortunately had some needles, which I'd carried up and again from the Shell Company Island. But I know some were using bamboo and running it in with that. But it's amazing when you see the theatres now and you think of what you did up there and got away with. It was quite extraordinary. Yes. I remember Charles Anderson, my CO, had a motto. He said, you fellows must all remember it takes a lot of lead to kill a man. And I think, when you think of that with the operating, but the way you treated the people up there with, when you're forced to, when you think of that and consider it with the operating theatres of today, and the trouble you take of there, it's really shattering.
Yes.
You wonder about just as well there was not too many legal eagles about, I think, in those days.
Well, talking about legal eagles, one who comes to mind was George Gwynn, who was a solicitor before he went up on the line.
Yes.
And I understand that you had contact with George.
George was one of those who came and, yes, he was one of the officers who turned around. And it was very important to have people like that responsible who you could trust. When anybody came in and cited a sign or suspicion that this was a cholera case, what we'd do, we had no paper or anything like that to waste doing that, we'd just tie bamboo tabs around their wrist with their name on, because in 12 hours' time it was just impossible to recognise them. This is where